Good morning everybody, and welcome to Whiteacre Crag overlooking the Haweswater Reservoir. This is one of my favourite locations in the whole of the Lake District, but it wasn't where I was supposed to be filming today. And we'll come back to why I'm here in a minute, but let's first off address the subject of today's video. And that is why I believe that gear isn't important to photography, and why fixating on gear is the wrong thing for me personally to be doing. Now I'd like to start today's video by thanking everybody that left a comment on last Friday's video when I was up on Shipman Knots photographing that fantastic mist that we had on the hills above the Long Sleddle Valley. And a lot of people that commented on that video were asking, did I regret not taking the 6D up with me? You see, I was up there shooting with the Canon M50, which is the camera that I always use when I'm up in the fells. And there were even some people that were saying that because I was shooting handheld with a small mirrorless camera like the M50, that I couldn't actually be a proper landscape photographer. And it's these points that I want to address in today's video. Let me start by addressing why I have been using the M50 so much for my photography recently. It all started in lockdown. Now, when lockdown was first introduced here in the UK, we were only allowed out of the house to exercise. And I still wanted to carry on taking photographs. As a photographer, I find it very, very difficult to turn off that creative part of me that wants to go out and take photographs. So I wanted to continue to take photographs. And so what I decided to do was to take my camera with me whenever I went out to exercise. Now I felt that going out with a big camera and all my full kit, the tripod particularly, and setting up the camera and standing there waiting for things to happen, as I would normally, was not in the spirit of lockdown. And so what I wanted to do was to try a different approach. And that involved taking my Canon M50, which at the time was the camera that I used to film these videos, out and just explore what I saw. And if I saw something as I was walking, I would stop, take a quick picture of it, and then head on. And that was enough for me to feed that creative part of me and keep that ticking over throughout lockdown. There were a couple of things that came out of my experience during lockdown. And the first one was that I really enjoyed the simplicity of shooting with a simple camera and a single lens. I really enjoyed that. And I've known for a long time that often having a lot of gear just gets in the way of your photography. And you spend too much time worrying about what lens should I use and what filters should I use and what settings should I use, rather than focusing on capturing the image. And that's what I was doing in lockdown. I was just thinking about getting the shot. The second thing that I noticed was that the shots were very different from the type of photographs that I would normally take. Now, first off, I was shooting exclusively in black and white, and that's because I was taking photographs when I was out exercising, and I wasn't necessarily exercising at first thing in the morning at sunrise. I was out exercising often during the middle of the day when the light wasn't as good as it could be, and black and white photography is generally a little bit more forgiving in those conditions. But it was more than that. The images had more of a documentary feel to them. And although perhaps each individual image wouldn't stack up on its own against some of my other work, as a whole, when you brought together those images, they actually added up to more than the sum of their parts. And what I actually ended up doing was creating a small photo essay that shared my experiences of photography throughout lockdown and my ability through lockdown to reconnect with my local area. I'd enjoyed my photography during lockdown so much that when lockdown measures were eased and I was allowed back out into the Lake District once again, I made the decision that I actually wanted to continue to shoot in this way. And I made the decision to split my channel in two. My Tuesday video would be shooting in the traditional way that I always had done. So that would involve me predominantly visiting locations in the Lake District, often around the edges of the lakes, and shooting with my full frame DSLR, my bag full of lenses, a whole host of filters, and my big tripod. Often photographing compositions that I'd researched previously. But my Friday video, I wanted to take a much closer approach to the one that I'd been experiencing throughout lockdown. So this was going out and shooting what I saw, not planning my shoot. And I made the decision that I wanted to create a piece of work, a body of work, where I'm documenting the far eastern fells closest to where I live in Shap, right on the edge of the Lake District National Park. And so at the beginning of June, I started this project. And I plan to take a year to shoot from the summits, basically, of the 35 odd fells that make up the far eastern fells. And I want to bring those images together to create, as I say, a larger body of work. Now that could be in the form of an exhibition, or it could be in the form of another talk to a camera club, or maybe even a calendar, or even my very first photography book. And so that's why I started that project, and that's why I am using the M50 for all of my Friday videos. Now, one of the things that I learned very early on in the project is the importance of being in the right place at the right time, and that typically means being at the top of the fells in time for sunrise. And so that involved me getting up really early, hiking up there in the dark, often to locations that I've never been before. But as you can see, that approach has really been paying off for me. I have had some fantastic conditions. It hasn't just been the quality of the light, but I've also had 2 cloud inversions and that glorious mist that we had last week. And I've also found that by keeping my gear light, that helped me massively to do that, to get up to the top of the fells, to navigate some of these tricky climbs in the dark, without having to worry too much about the weight of my bag. Now, that does have a big impact on both my agility and my stamina. Now, if you've ever met me, if you've been on a one-to-one, if you've come on a workshop, then chances are I will have got you to hold my proper bag, to feel just how heavy it is. Now, I don't know what the difference in weight is, but it is significant. It's definitely something that would stop me or discourage me from going on a big hike up a particularly difficult climb that I'd never done before. And so that is a really, really important thing. Keeping my gear light for these shoots that are up in the mountains is absolutely critical. I realised when I started the project that I needed to buy another camera. The camera that I'd been using during lockdown was the M50 that I used to record video. And if I wanted to get up into the fells and share my experiences with you, I would need a camera for video and a camera for stills. And I wanted to continue to use a mirrorless camera. I found mirrorless much easier to use handheld because I could continue to shoot in manual mode and just set my shutter speed, and I could see exactly what the image was going to look like in the EVF. And I even have a live view histogram in there so I can get my exposure spot on every time. When I tried to do that in the past with a DSLR, I've ended up having to take a shot based on the metering system of the camera, then review it on the back, and then make any changes that I need to in order to get the right exposure. And that was slowing me down. So it had to be another mirrorless camera. Now, I did consider both the EOS R and the EOS RP, but I decided that they were both too expensive for me. Let's remember that I'm a full-time landscape photographer in my first year. I'm not generating a huge amount of income, and I certainly don't have a lot of income to invest back in the business, certainly not in new equipment. And so what I ultimately decided to do was simply to buy another M50. I'd really enjoyed using it during lockdown, and I was able to get a second-hand one pretty cheaply. Now, I think when people are comparing the 60 with the M50, their main concern is image quality. I don't think they believe that the image quality is good enough for a professional landscape photographer. And to be honest, I had shot a little bit with the M50 beforehand, typically taking pictures of people on workshops and one-to-ones, so they had a memento to take away with them. So I was aware of some of the image quality issues, particularly the purple fringing that you get when using this camera in certain lighting conditions, but that has more to do with the lenses than the camera itself. And to be honest with you, I didn't know what I was going to do with the images that came out of this project when I started. I certainly wasn't considering selling prints. I didn't think that the quality of this camera was going to be good enough. However, over time, as I've taken more and more images of it, I've actually realised that the quality of this camera is perfectly acceptable for producing prints, high quality prints. And I've actually produced some and sold some, and I've had very, very good feedback. And so for me now, that is no longer a concern. I think the other thing that people are concerned about is that by limiting my gear, I'm going to miss out on shots. And that is definitely the case. There have been many occasions when I've been up on the fells and I've wanted something that is longer than the standard zoom lens that I have on this camera. But I've also noticed that one of the things that's come out of this is I actually started to get much better at using foreground in my images. Because I can't reach some of the things that are in the distance, I'm forced to take photographs that have something in the distance and something in the foreground. And that's really helped me to produce images that have a lot more depth to them. So by limiting my gear, I've actually improved my compositions. And one of the things I've wanted for my channel, right from the word go, was to inspire as many people as I possibly can to get involved in landscape photography. And one of the things that I get asked all the time is my camera good enough for me to do landscape photography? And the answer is, of course it is. I genuinely believe that the two most important things in landscape photography are being in the right place at the right time and composition. And if you can get those two things right, then I think you're in a position you can start to worry about things like image quality, and therefore having a camera that allows you to produce higher quality images. But this whole discussion really got stemmed from a photograph that I took at this very spot about 8 years ago. It is still today one of my favourite images that I've ever taken. And I have visited this location on many occasions, and I've yet to be able to capture quite the same atmosphere as I captured on that day. And despite it being one of my favourite images, it was taken on a small, compact camera. It was a Canon S90, 10 megapixels. And if I try to use that camera today, I can see quality issues. The camera is well over 10 years old now. It's 10-year-old technology. But that image isn't a bad image 10 years later because it was taken on an old camera. That image, as far as I'm concerned, is timeless. So there you go, that's the background about why I've been using the M50 so much for my photography just recently, and why I believe that gear is far less important than being in the right place at the right time and getting your composition right. Now, I suspect that a lot of you are going to have your own opinions on this subject, and I do encourage you to leave a comment below. But I would ask on this occasion that if you do want to share your own feelings and experiences with everybody, please, please, please remember to be respectful. Now I do realise that I said at the beginning of this video I was explaining why I was at Whiteacre Crag in the first place. And the reason is that I got my location wrong today. So I've been saying all along the most important thing is being in the right place at the right time. And this morning I was in the wrong place. And so I ended up nipping down here to do a quick video to share my thoughts on gear. So clearly on this occasion I've actually had gear more in my mind than the things I should have been concentrating on. Anyway, I'll see you next time. Bye bye.